Really interesting topic today, so really pleased that you're all here and have been able to join us, so thank you very much. So the topic we're discussing today is actually very vital. So on one hand, we're seeing lots of heightened awareness of buying ethically. And then on the other hand, we're seeing a huge year of online sales. So we're really here to kind of combine those trends, get to the bottom of how it's working for brands and businesses and how we can make the most of these trends, as well as hearing what Fairtrade can do and how it can help, and listen to our exciting panelists. A couple of housekeeping pieces. So this session will be recorded, and I've just seen the top left-hand corner, it is recording now. And the second piece is that we have a chat box. So please do type your questions. We will get to a Q&A after some discussion. And we also have lots of people online that may be able to answer your questions while we're chatting as well. So please chat along, use the chat box and ask any questions you have. So now to introduce you to our fantastic panel today, bringing loads of expertise. So firstly, I want to introduce you to Rose Price. She's the buying director at Ocado and responsible for the buying function. Her adventure at Ocado actually started back in 2010 when she joined as head of buying, but she has a vast experience in the food industry. She's done food retailing at various big brand names, cash and carry, worked throughout the supply chain, and she has an industry reputation for her knowledge from farm gate to plate. And she's here today from her farmhouse. We caught up just earlier, so very excited to hear from Rose. In addition, we also have Caroline Holm, who's Senior Director at GlobeScan, and has actually been at GlobeScan over 13 years. So Caroline is a real consumer and stakeholder insight expert. So really great to have her today. Her specialities include sustainability, corporate purpose, reputation, issues of management, and consumer research. And I've been told she actually has some brand new research on fair trade, some of which I believe we have permission to exclusively share today as a bit of a sneak peek. So I'm very much excited about that. My name is LJ Loftus. I'm Head of Supply Chain and Programme Management at the Fairtrade Foundation, and I've been at Fairtrade over 10 years myself. So you have a good panel of people for today's discussion. So without further ado, I will start with the first audience poll. So that should be going out now. Great, perfect. So which of these sustainability trends are you seeing with your consumers? So choose whatever ones resonate with you. Increased demand for ethical products, demand for environmentally friendly products, demand for less plastics, demand for products that are open about their origin and their supply chain, demand for ethical authenticity, credentials or facts behind claims, or actually no change. So please do fill that in. And while we wait to hear from the audience, Rose, I will start with you with an initial similar question. So what is Ocado seeing now in the future of consumer trends to watch out for? And how far ahead are you in your planning?
So we obviously plan for the future, and we're always looking for more fair trade products, and I'll come on to that probably a bit later on. But 83% of Ocado customers describe sustainability as being really important or very important in their grocery shopping. And Ocado customers, interestingly, report that fair wages for producers are as important as factor as plastic packaging and recyclable packaging when deciding their if their grocery product is sustainable. And I think that's really an interesting fact. And I think when you actually look at their sort of purchasing decision, plastic packaging and reducing it and avoiding it is very top of mind, number one, and the producers are paid a fair wage, number two, and then obviously then comes recyclable packaging. And I think it's great that the fair wage for producers is up there.
And Caroline, from your perspective with GlobeScan, what sustainability trends and demands in the consumer market are you seeing?
Well, we have an awful lot of trends. We've been tracking consumer attitudes on sustainability for well over 20 years, actually. So we got quite a lot to draw from. But I think what's quite interesting, thinking about the past year, which we've had so much disruption. We did a consumer study sort of mid last year, right in the middle of the pandemic. It was a study of consumer attitudes across 25 countries, including the UK. And what we saw then was that attitudes towards sustainability and ethical purchasing really intensified pretty much across all the questions that we were asking. So more people than ever seem to want to live sustainably and to buy more responsibly. So we found that 47% of people in the UK said that they're willing to pay more for products and brands that work to improve society and the environment. And that's a record high. That's 8 percentage points higher than it was the previous year. But there is still this attitude behaviour gap that I'm sure a lot of people on the call will recognise. The gap between those who act and those who want to act. And I think that's one of those sort of persisting trends that we've seen. So, for example, 23% of people have rewarded companies for being socially responsible by buying their products, and that's gone up significantly. But there's also this further sort of larger proportion of 34% of people who have considered doing that, but haven't actually done so. And again, that's increased. And when we look at things like why people might not be buying as ethically as they'd like, why they're not doing as much as they'd like to do to be environmentally or socially more responsible, there's really two things that come out quite strongly. And one is around support from government. That will relate very much to things like packaging and recycling that Rose mentioned, but also support from business. So they do need more support, and they do need more direction from brands.
Interesting. And what do you think we can gather, particularly with respect to fair trade products?
I think one of the conclusions that we can draw is that people do need more help to buy ethically. So they want to, and they just need a bit more help. And then they also need sustainability information that they can really trust. So one of the data points from the research we've just done for fair trade in the UK, research we've been doing for about 12 years now, we found that trust in the fair trade mark stands at 87% of people trusting fair trade. We've also found that 73% of people say that fair trade makes it easier for them to shop ethically. So there's really two things from that. Firstly, that it's a trusted logo, and it's something that they can look out for or recognise easily.
Okay, great. I'm just looking for the results for our poll. So I'm hoping somebody can pop them in the chat box to us. So we can also see, oh great, it's just brilliant. So hopefully you can all see that on your screens. So interestingly, increased demand for less plastic, 75%, but still in the top are environmental friendly products and ethical products as well. So yeah, interesting to see what our audience are also saying. And I'm going to do another poll. Rose, I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm going to ask the audience first. So I'm just going to launch a new poll about brand or business strategy. So which elements are the most important in maximising sales? And then a follow-up question about brand or business strategy, and asking about which elements are the most important when we're looking at brand loyalty and advocacy. So while everyone's doing the poll, I'm going to come to you, Rose. So what are shoppers asking retailers to stock in terms of ethical products? And are any of these different online versus kind of in-store retail, bricks and mortar retail?
I think it's very difficult for me to tell you whether it's different versus bricks and mortar. We do carry a pretty large range of fair trade in comparison to our competitors. So I think that does show how important this is to our customers. 2/3 of our customers say that it's really important to include fair trade products in their shop. I think the other thing for me is the fact that, you know, over a quarter of our customers buy fair trade products on a weekly basis. So it's not just that they say that, it's actually that they do action it. And I think, you know, we want to expand our fair trade range, although, you know, when we look at it, we can see that, you know, the bananas, etc., are really the sort of big product that we sell, but bananas more naturally would be one of the largest products we sell anyway when it comes to volume. But it is actually making sure that we offer the range and, you know, the customers can find them. And I think, you know, thinking about the packaging, fighting food waste, etc., that's really important. But we do also try and make sure that, you know, we cover the granolas, the frozen foods, etc.
And do you think online shopping is more kind of habit driving for consumers? Do you see any trends in that versus kind of traditional retail?
I think yes, from a habit driving point of view, of course, you have your favourites where, you know, online shopping, you have a list of favourites and you buy a fair trade product and it goes into your favourites. So when you are shopping, that's obviously one of the things that will come up in your regular shops. So I think that does make things easier because you find the product very easily. And I think we may touch on it a bit later. We've tried very hard to make sure we have a fair trade. Well, we haven't tried hard. We have a fair trade shop to make it easier for customers to find these products. And then it does become a habit forming and easy for anyone who's interested in the product to find it.
And if you're a brand, Rose, what are the ways in which a brand can stand out on this virtual shelf?
So I think on the virtual shelf, being part of the fair trade shop is important because it's one of the first places customers will go to if they're interested in finding the product. Also being part of the search term when it comes to the more natural products. So, you know, if the customer's searching coffee, making sure that you are one of the featured search terms within that search term coffee that brings you to the top of the page. And I think we have used and will continue to use our magazine, making sure that we use, you know, bloggers, Facebook, etc., to talk about fair trade. And we certainly did that through Fair Trade Fortnight.
Can we see, I don't know if we can share the poll that we just put out while we were listening. Oh, perfect. Hopefully everyone can see this. So interesting to compare. So on importance in terms of maximizing sales, being visible online, 53%, much higher, interesting, Rose, from what we were just talking about, than 20% bricks and mortar shelf presence. And getting our products listed by retailers still sort of near a third. If we're looking at brand loyalty and advocacy, the audience is saying, oh, 80%. Okay, being a brand that reflects good ethics, driven by more than profit. And we obviously have an audience here today that are interested in fair trade and interested in ethics, but that's really great to see such a strong proportion. And even 36% a trusted ethical certification, and then the environmental credentials that we've also been talking about. So I'm going to move to you, Caroline, and just ask you a question about what you see as the ethical trends that are here to actually stay or will get more prevalent over the next few years.
I just want to, I'll just cover that in a second. I just want to respond a little bit to the poll that you just had up. Because I think it's very interesting about the sort of brand focus and having that brand that reflects values is something that we've seen in other consumer research that we've done, where the kind of brand itself, the core values, the kind of why behind a lot of the sustainability initiatives that brands are taking are really important for consumers. They do want to sort of see, they recognise when a brand isn't being authentic, and it is very important that that is part of the brand identity from a consumer point of view as well. Just going back to more of the trends, which obviously I'm very interested in here at GlobeScan. I think the thing that I referred to a little bit earlier was the way that I think it's really people's concerns around ethical shopping, around social and environmental issues. They haven't faltered during the pandemic. And I think that's something we weren't sure about until we actually did our research last year. That we found that people are just as worried about climate change and about poverty as they were before. So we found that people in the UK, over half of them think that climate change is a very serious issue. A similar proportion think that poverty, extreme poverty, is also a very serious issue, and there is no change since 2019. But we've also found that things like COVID, the state of the global economy, concerns about those have increased really significantly. So it's not as though there is a sort of limited reservoir of worry that people have. It's, one issue goes up and something else goes down. It is that people do, they are concerned about lots of things all at once. And I think that also sort of reflects in some of their expectations of brands as well. So the other trend that we've seen, and that is an ongoing kind of trend, is that people's expectations of companies are broad and they're deep. So they're broad and they span across lots of different social and environmental issues. And we saw that just now with the earlier poll around its concerns about packaging, about fair wages, about all sorts of things. Having a responsible supply chain, not damaging the environment, as well as things like, wanting quality products at fair prices. All of these things are there. And it's something that we see not just in the UK, we see it across lots of other countries. And we expect this to be an ongoing trend. We expect people's concerns and expectations to increase. And to broaden, and they are demanding more of business, they are demanding more of brands, and then the bar is also being raised by some brands and some companies, some retailers that are taking a stand and rolling out social and environmental initiatives, that they're sort of opening up their supply chains, they're even campaigning about social and environmental issues. So sort of the bar is being raised by some of the companies and retailers out there as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caroline. It's there's just so many things on the table, isn't it? We almost want everyone to get behind one focus, but the reality is that that's just not what is prevalent. And Rose, from your perspective, what do you think you've been able to do to make it easier for shoppers to kind of buy fair trade? And what's your advice to other retailers that are looking to promote fair trade products online? What have you learned?
So I think I've already touched on the fair trade aisle that we launched. And I think that we were the first retailer to do that in the UK, and it really did make it easy for our shoppers to find the products. And I think that's really important. Now, obviously, it's not for me to advise other retailers, but you can see what's happened with the likes of Freefrom, etc., in other retailers where there is a complete aisle for that. And it does make it easier in store, if you're in store, to find those products. Online is certainly easier because those products can all be placed in a line in one place. And I think the fact we have a shop, it also enables us to talk more about the fair trade campaign and allows customers to actually explore what's in there and look, go onto the back of the pack, read about the products and really understand what they're buying into. And I think that's the thing that's really important. I've touched on the magazines and blogs and social media already. And I think we've tried not to limit. And I always think if you're choosing a lifestyle, whatever that might be, if you want a fair trade lifestyle, how do you expand into all areas? So whilst, of course, we've got the chocolate, the bananas, the coffee, we have taken on the granolas, the spices, the vanillas, soft drinks, molasses, wine, and it's what more can we get into the range to actually allow you ease of shop and to choose the fair trade lifestyle.
And Rose, have you seen, has there been a change as we've all moved to kind of mobile phones and shopping browsing on a much smaller screen than we were before, using laptops and computers? How have you seen those changes in relation to kind of promoting kind of the ethics and authenticity of brands?
So of course, if you're using a very small thumbprint on a mobile screen, it becomes really difficult. But the Fairtrade logo is quite clear, and it's making sure that's on the front of pack and making sure the image can show the Fairtrade logo. And I think that's, you know, that visibility part, the image and the quality of the image is really important on the product packaging. And I think, you know, that's something that all suppliers need to think about when they're developing new products and their packaging.
Yeah, really, really important, isn't it? Because you've only got the small piece on the screen.
Yeah. And that's where the logo really stands out. And it's as long as we can get the customer to recognise the logo, that's the thing that will draw customers in.
And Caroline, perhaps you can now just share with us any kind of fair trade insights. I think Rose talking specifically about the Fairtrade Mark and the label is a good opportunity to hear some insights from that GlobeScan has found.
Yeah, sure. So as I said before, we have been tracking things like trust, awareness, people's perceptions of fair trade for about 12 years now. We do a survey about pretty much every other year. And it's a really good way to sort of track what people are thinking about ethical certifications, about ethical behaviour in shopping, and also about fair trade itself. And in our latest survey results, the sort of hot off the press, as you say, we found that fair trade as continues to be the best known ethical label. And in the study this year, we found that prompted awareness, so that's when people are shown the logo and asked if they've seen it, often or occasionally, we found that stands at 93% of people in the UK. It's very high. It's gone up slightly since last year. Spontaneous awareness, so that's when we just ask people generally to think about any ethical label or environmentally friendly label that they can think of that they've seen on products. That stands now at 29%. That's a very high level for that kind of a metric. And then trust also remains very high, and that is something I know is really important to you, and it's important to probably to everybody on the call. You know, trust in your brand is absolutely critical, and it's a license to operate. And 87% of people who recognise the label, which is, as we know, is a vast majority of people, say they trust it. That's gone up from 84% in 2019. And 56% of people have the highest level of trust. A lot of percentages I'm throwing at you, but it just gives a sense of sort of, we're talking about quite big numbers here. And I think the other interesting thing is that we have seen increased levels of trust for fair trade, but also for when we look at certifications generally. Trust in certifications, other sort of ethical labels seem to have gone up. People seem to want credentials that they can trust, and then the other piece is to make it easier for them to shop ethically. So that does seem to have increased. And in fact, the top attribute that people associate with fair trade is that it makes it easy for them to decide if a product's ethically produced or not. And 73% of people said this. So, you know, it very much ties in with what Rose said. I can I just add one other thing around online, just to do with online shopping. And I know Rose said, I mean, the work that you're doing at Ocado is great in terms of, you know, helping people, you know, find products, whether it's fair trade products or other more sustainable products is fantastic. And I think when we looked at online shoppers in our survey, we found that pretty much across the board, the attitudes are pretty similar. So to most people, so online shoppers aren't this sort of very unique group. They seem to, they're just as aware as everybody else about fair trade. They trust fair trade at the same level. But the difference is when we look at barriers to shopping for, say, to buying fair trade products online. And we found that the top reason for online shoppers for not buying fair trade products online is the perception that there's a limited range of products available. So they think they're just not finding fair trade products easily online. And I think that's a kind of, it's quite an interesting thing to sort of follow up on, and great that Ocado are trying to make that easier for people, because it does seem to be a problem for online grocery shoppers specifically. And we found that the vast majority of them want it to be a bit easier for them to identify fair trade products when they're shopping online.
Interesting, very interesting. Rose, I wonder if you've got a kind of fair trade buying success story or a example to show how it's worked well at all that you could share with us.
Yes, I mean the big buying success story for us were fair trade bananas. From 2019 to 2020, Ocado actually had seen their fair trade banana growth grow at over 100%, which was fantastic. But what was really, I suppose, even more important, that a large proportion of the money from those bananas went out into the Dominican Republic. And it was one of the projects that one of the producer groups over there had, was to choose to finance university scholarship schemes. And it was great for us to actually see that we were enabling families to send their children to university. And it, you know, they had a choice on what to spend the premium on, but they actually believed that supporting young people with improving their skills and their persona and professionalism would really help. So, you know, that was the great success story for us in Ocado.
Yeah, really, really interesting. What a huge impact. Did you say over 100% sales?
Yes, it was over 100% sales.
Wow.
So huge increase, but more importantly, it was the fact that we knew where the money was going into the Dominican Republic and what was happening to it, and I think that was very important.
Extremely impactful.
Yeah.
And in terms of how you promote the fair trade bananas online, is there any learnings from that? Is it just ensuring, as you were saying earlier, the fair trade mark is there, or
it's just being very clear to consumers? I think that it comes back. It was interesting when Caroline said that unfortunately people can't find products online. Of course, for every consumer that comes to Ocado, there's over 50,000 products on the website. So it's making sure that we do make it easy for customers and consumers to actually find the products easily. And I think, you know, it's interesting to hear Caroline's insight. This is where for us it's making sure that the products are in a collection together, and it comes back to, you know, making sure that we use the right search terms, etc. And if you do search bananas, you will see fair trade bananas very quickly too.
Yeah, this sounds something that's very important. I think we've got some time for some questions from the audience. So I'm just going to review the chat and see. So please do. Looks like we've had lots of requests for the research, and this will be going on YouTube. Let me have a look if there's any. This is where it's much easier to pass around a microphone in real life, but bear with me while I quickly scan. I think we've had a message that is asking if we can suggest any creative tips to promote fair trade products. I don't know if you've got any kind of left field suggestions or any creative tips that could work beyond what you've already shared with us, Rose, and the kind of insights you've shared, Caroline. Anything in addition?
I think Fair Trade Fortnight is very good, but should it just be Fair Trade Fortnight? And I suppose that's where we should be working with yourselves to say, how do we expand on this, and make more of fair trade all year. And it's not that we don't have fair trade available all year. We should think and work together on this to say, from a creative point of view, what more can we do throughout the year?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. When Fair Trade was launched, and Fair Trade Fortnight was a way of galvanizing everyone to kind of build the movement. But we are in a different place now, so I think that's really interesting and quite thought-provoking, Rose, for us.
Yeah, I think we should talk about seasonal fair trade as well. Fair trade chocolates. We have fair trade chocolates, but do we talk about fair trade chocolates at Christmas? And they're questions we should ask ourselves as well. So I think a great question for us as a team here.
Yeah, definitely. And Caroline, I've got some questions around trends on whether we've seen changes and increases since the pandemic. So I don't know where your data set is, but if there's anything you can share on changes since COVID hit us last March.
Well, we have the latest Fair Trade survey results that we shared, that I shared earlier, that was just conducted just about a month or so ago. So that's sort of in this period. The earlier things that I shared around the people's attitudes to ethical purchasing and sustainability, those were from June last year. So we've kind of got some quite nice data points. We're going to be doing some GlobeScan research in June again this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how things have changed over time. But I think the general consensus is that the attitudes have intensified. If anything, they've probably ethical trends have accelerated through the pandemic. People haven't been distracted by that, and they are concerned about the planet. They're concerned about people's welfare as well, increasingly more concerned about the world around them, and they're seeming to be taking more action as well, and it's up to all of us to help them with that and to raise standards. I think it might be interesting to share a little bit about, I know somebody in the chat mentioned about the younger generations, of which I'm definitely not a part. So but I think there's some quite interesting trends there that are probably worth just touching on a little bit, because there's a lot of assumptions that are made, and I think it's really good to look at research, what the research says about younger generations. And I think there's a couple of things that are interesting when we look at trends there. And this is from the Fair Trade survey that we just conducted about a month or so ago, so it feels quite sort of fresh and real. And we found that for younger generations, we asked, one of the questions we asked in our survey was around what are the most motivating impact areas for ethical and environmental labels generally, not specifically fair trade, but generally. What are the impact areas of these kinds of labels and certifications that mean most, that matter most to consumers? And across the board, for everybody, it was really eradicating child labour in the supply chain. That was absolutely number one, including for younger generations. So eradicating child labour and forced labour, that was top of the list. But they were also, the younger generations were also quite strongly motivated by things like tackling poverty, improving living standards for farmers and workers, and other impacts related to addressing inequalities more than the average. So they were more focused on kind of these people impacts, and one of them was another people impact was around helping farmers adapt to climate change. And I think that that sort of aligns very well with the campaign that you did earlier in the year around climate justice. That kind of thing really seems to resonate well with younger shoppers. I think the other thing that's sort of interesting is around younger shoppers and how they feel about fair trade credentials when they're shopping. And a couple of things that we found that stood out from the data was that, first of all, that over 7 in 10 of the 18 to 24s, so those are the super young, I think, those of them who recognise the label say that they're more likely to shop at a store or visit a cafe that they know has a strong commitment to fair trade products, and that was higher than the average. That was the average was actually 15 percentage points lower than for that young age group. And the other thing that's more of an emotional connection is that they feel prouder to shop or visit cafes with fair trade with a fair trade commitment. So I think that's interesting as well. So it's a sort of behaviour and a pride or emotional connection that those 18 to 24s seem to feel more than the rest of us, as it were.
Yeah, really interesting, Caroline. And we've also had a question, Rose, about the virtual fair trade aisle and whether you're kind of monitoring how many people are visiting that. Is that something you're kind of looking at since you've done the piece of work on the website?
Yes, it is something we're monitoring and watching, and I think it's also, we are looking. One thing you can always tell online if people look for something and it doesn't convert. So if there's something missing, we're now trying to find products which customers are searching for in that aisle that actually isn't available. So it's helping us to build up a portfolio of products that we will actually need going forward.
Interesting, yeah. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. So what I would like you to do as our panelists for this Fair Focus is just kind of give me your final thoughts and a call to action for the audience that you would like to leave. So perhaps, Caroline, I can start with you and then we'll end with Rose.
Yeah, sure. So this will really be sort of summing up pretty much what I've sort of said in my in some of the insights that I shared. There's really three broad conclusions that we can draw from some of the research that we've done. I think the first thing is very obvious, is that there is this growing trend for more ethical shopping, and that's in terms of both desire to shop ethically and also actual shopping ethically. The second thing is that there are challenges for consumers in shopping ethically, especially for online shoppers. So we saw that that some of them struggle to find fair trade products when they're shopping online. And I think the third point is that trusted labels like fair trade and other independent certifications make it easier for consumers to make the ethical choices that they do want to make. And there's also this halo effect for brands that are associated with them in terms of building trust. So I suppose the call to action might be to probably around that sort of brand element, the brand values element, turning your ethical credentials into a brand asset. I'd say it's a little bit conceptual, but I think that would be, I think it's a really good thing for any brand to consider, how to turn your credentials, whether it's fair trade or other things, and sustainability credentials into a kind of brand asset and an opportunity with your customers. Thanks
so much, Caroline. And over to you, Rose.
So I think we've touched on it. We can see it in the data this morning. There's increased demand for ethical products, and it's making sure that with the Fair Trade Foundation, we work on making sure the products are visible. I think that's come out quite clearly today in talking to yourself, and how do we make sure we use the brand logo and make sure that visibility is there. And I suppose that the one thing for me is fair trade not just for a fortnight. How can we work with yourselves, and this is our challenge together, to make sure that we think about fair trade for a longer period than a fortnight. And we're doing that now, but working with yourselves as well to do that. And I think that's the thing that excites me. The products are there. How do we actually expand on what we're doing today?
So we've actually given ourselves a call to action, Rose, which is which is really great. I just want to thank you both for your time and sharing your expertise today. It's been absolutely invaluable, but also to the audience for joining us. I can see the chat has been, there's been lots in the chat, more than I've been able to follow while I've been listening to Caroline and Rose, but I know the Fairtrade team have been keeping track of it, and we will be doing a follow-up, and I've seen that also we'll be sharing the polls on email as well. So just a big thank you for joining us, and I wish you all well for the rest of today and look forward to seeing you at Fair Focus in the future. Thank you very, very